Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to our 9th lesson of our simplified Tajweed series, which is a series of Tajweed lessons introduced by Quran University, uniquely designed Quran learning management system with the purpose of introducing Tajweed in a modern and easy approach. Through this series of lessons, you'll be introduced to Tajweed rules using a unique, modern, and innovative approach to teach Tajweed, utilizing the color codes of Mushaf al-Tajweed as a common denominator to link between those lessons and Tajweed rules. With such approach, we aim to make the understanding of Tajweed rules much easier and help you to practically apply those rules while reading the Quran. So let's start Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim with our topic for this lesson, which is Introduction to the Noon, Sakinah and Tanween rules. And the title for this lesson in Arabic is مقدمة أحكام النون الساكنة والتنوين, which will be an introduction that will introduce the following 5 lessons related to the Noon, Sakinah and Tanween rules. If you remember what we have discussed in the previous lesson, where we have introduced the concept of 2 letters convergence. And Noon Sakinah, the still Noon, is actually no more than a special case of the 2 letters convergence. Let's revise what we have learned in the previous lesson, where we have mentioned that we have 4 possibilities for the convergence of any 2 letters, which can be either identical, similar, close, or distant letters. And we defined each one of those and the difference between them. Then we talked about the probabilities of vowelization versus still status of those 2 letters. And those 4 probabilities would be based on the first and second letter haraka and sukoon, where the first probability was having the first letter being still and the second letter being vowelized. And then we mentioned that the associated Tajweed rules will be based on this order. So with this first situation, there was idgham and Ivar, and then there were the other 3 other possibilities or probabilities with the Tajweed rules associated with them. An example of identical letters where the Noon Sakinah is the first is basically having a Noon and a Noon. Another example of similar letters with a Noon Sakinah is a Noon with a Mim. Both are coming from or sharing the nasal articulation zone. Now, an example of closed letters is basically the Noon and Ra, and example of distant letters is the Noon and Ain. So the Noon Sakinah followed by any vowelized letter would have all the 4 possibilities, and it has its special Tajweed rules as we're going to explore in the next few minutes. And in this lesson, we're going to concentrate only on the first probability, where the first letter is still and the second letter is vowelized. And again, out of this only one probability, we're going to take only one case, which is basically the first letter being a still Noon, Noon Sakinah, and followed by any vowelized letter. And let's take these 2 closed letters, the Noon and Ra, and if we have a Noon Sakinah, Min, and then we have Rabbihim, Ra coming after the Noon Sakinah. So the first letter is Noon Sakinah still, and the second letter is a Ra with Fatha, vowelized. Then such convergence between this Noon and Ra would result in a special Tajweed rule called idgham. And that's basically the topic of this introduction. We're going to talk about the convergence of 2 letters where the first one is a Noon Sakinah, Min, Rabbihim. Noon and Ra are meeting. The still Noon, the Noon Sakinah, at the end of one word, Min, has met a following letter of the beginning of the following word. This word Rabbihim, the first letter is Ra. Now another example is Ambihum. Here, the Noon Sakinah has met the following letter, which is the Ba in this case, within a same word, within a single word. Now, what's Tanween and what's the relationship of Tanween and Noon Sakinah? As we said, Noon Sakinah is basically one of the letters of the alphabet with a sukoon, with still no haraka. Now, the Tanween, it is an extra Noon Sakinah added to the end of a name, any name. And it's written in the format of duplicate Fatha or duplicate Kasra or duplicate Dhamma. So there are 3 types of Tanween. Tanween with Fath, Tanween with Kasr, Tanween with Dhamm. And the example is as we see here for the word Kitab. Kitab is a book. Now a book with Tanween, Fath, Kitaban, or Kitabun, Tanween Dhamm, or Kitabin, Tanween with Kasr, duplicate Fatha, duplicate Dhamma, duplicate Kasra, and it is pronounced like this: Kitaban, kitabun, kitabin. So basically, after the word kitab, there is a nun sakinah with a fatha on the last letter of kitab, and that's tanween fatha. So nun sakinah is basically a part of tanween. So tanween, the word tanween means adding a nun. Nun, tanween. So thus we conclude that the tanween adds a nun sakinah to the end of the word, and accordingly, same rules of tajweed that applies for the nun sakinah would automatically applies for the tanween. Now let's take a case of tanween. We have taken a case of nun sakinah at the end of the words followed by a letter in a second word, and then a nun sakinah converging or meeting and another letter within the same word. Now let's take a case of tanween. يومئذ, the val here has tanween kasr, and it's followed by a letter of following word na'ima. We realize something here. Tanween always happen at the end of the word. So there is no chance for tanween to be followed by a second letter within the same or a single word, as in the nun sakinah. Nun sakinah has two possibilities. It can happen at the end of the word following by a followed word, or it can happen with two letters converging within a single word. But tanween always happen in two words. So the tanween of dal is basically a nun sakinah of as part of that tanween. Then there is a nun sakinah at the end of then, and that nun sakinah has met the nun of the following word, and that convergence would result in a rule of tajweed similar to that of the nun sakinah. So what are the tajweed rules of the still nun, the nun sakinah or tanween? The first rule is named iqlab. Iqlab means qalab al-shay, to turn things is upside down or to exchange it with something else. So basically, iqlab means exchange. Now, what do we mean by that? If we take the bi'um, there are nun sakinah followed by a ba with kasra within a single one word. Now, if we look at the rule of tajweed here, it will be bi'um. We're going to exchange the nun with a meme. Instead of saying bi'um, we say bi'um. And that exchange is basically what iqlab is. So, iqlab is the meeting of nun sakinah with a vowelized ba, resulting in exchanging the nun sakinah with a meme. So, iqlab is exchange. And it only happens with the letter ba. Another rule is idgham. Idgham means assimilation or merger. And let's take this example. Min rabbihim. We can merge the two letters into one. So instead of saying min rabbihim, the nun would be totally merged into the ra. And that will make the nun disappear. So instead of saying min rabbihim, we'll say mir rabbihim. No nun would be pronounced, only a ra, and the ra will be like duplicate ra. It has shadda. Mir rabbihim instead of min rabbihim. Mir rabbihim. So, meeting of a still nun with a vowelized ra, or any of those letters. These letters would also have the same rule of idgham, would result in idgham, merger of the nun into the following letter, which is a ra in this case. Now, the third rule is called Ivar. Ivar is basically to show something, to expose it, not to hide it. So Ivar is exposure. Min ibadeh. Min ibadeh. We cannot do idgham here like we have done in the previous case. If we say ibadeh, if we merge the two, it would be a different meaning, a different letter. So such merger is not proper. We should never do that. So whenever we have the letter ain, which is a distant letter, it's not a close letter, which should be pronounced independently. So it has to be clearly exposed. So each of the two letters, the nun and the ain, each letter should be clearly exposed, and that's basically what Ivar is. So meeting of a still nun with a vowelized ain, or any of those letters in this violet color, the beginning of those words, ha, ga, any of those letters, when it meets with the nun sakinah it should be clearly pronounced with Ivar, no hiding, no masking, no merging, no iqlab. And Ivar basically is the rule unless otherwise indicated in Tajweed in general. Or whenever you don't know a rule, make it Ivar. So the rule, the golden rule I would say, is Ivar unless specified otherwise. Now the last rule of Nun Sakinah is Ikhfa. And Ikhfa means hiding something or masking it. To mask a Nun would be to give it Ikhfa. Let's see here in a mithal, an example. Yun sarun. Nun with sukoon followed by a sad with fatha. So those two, if we merge them together, yun sarun, basically there is something new here. We're going to mask the Nun Sakinah, eliminating the oral articulation of the Nun. So the Nun has, remember, double articulation, one from the mouth, oral, and the second from the nasal passages, nasal. So the oral articulation would be totally eliminated, while we preserve the nasal articulation, adding it like a nasal tone to the following letter, which is the sad. So we say yun sarun, not yun sarun. Ikhfa is a bit of a difficult rule to apply for beginners, but as time passes by, you'll understand it. And we're going to explain it in details in a special lesson that follows this introduction. So, meeting of a still Nun with a vowelized sad results with Ikhfa, translated into mask or hiding. Ikhfa, hiding, where we hide the Nun, yet we keep its nasal tone. So, the rules of Nun Sakinah and Tanween are four possible Tajweed rules that would arise whenever a Nun Sakinah or Tanween converge with, which means meet another letter of the alphabet. And those are basically Iqlab. The first rule is Iqlab. Iqlab, as we said, is exchange. Second rule is Idgham or merger. Third rule is Izhar, exposure. There is a word here called glottal because later on we realize that Izhar itself has two types. And one of them is the glottal Izhar. And we have the Ikhfa, the real Ikhfa. Ikhfa means hiding, where we hide the Nun Sakinah or Tanween. And those four Tajweed rules for Nun Sakinah and Tanween are based on the following letter, the letter that follows the Nun Sakinah or Tanween. In the case of Iqlab, the following letter is Ba, and it's only one letter, the Ba, that causes Iqlab. On the other hand, Idgham is caused by several letters, and there are two groups of those. We're putting some of them in green and some of them in gray, indicating the ones that are associated with Idgham with Ghunna are the Ya, Nun, Mim and Waw, while the Lam and Ra are associated with Idgham without Ghunna. And both groups are gathered in single word, Yurmalun, the letters in green, Idgham with Ghunna, letters in gray, Idgham without Ghunna. The third rule happens when the exposure happens when we have those letters following the Nun Sakinah or Tanween. And those letters are gathered in the first letter of the following words. أخيها كعلما حازه غير خاسري, the Hamza and the Ha, the Ain and the Ha, the Ghain and the Kha. Now whenever any of those six letters comes after the Nun Sakinah or Tanween, the hukum, the rule would be exposure, Izhar. And the last rule, the Ikhfa, happens with the rest of the letters of the alphabet. So apart from the Ba and Yarmalun and the six letters, all the other letters are associated with the hukum of Ikhfa, hiding. There would be a full lesson dedicated to each one of those four rules. So if you don't grasp it right now, don't worry about it. This is just an introduction, preparing you and introducing you to the following 5 lessons that would follow this introduction, and which would have detailed explanation for each one of these rules. With that, we conclude our lesson for today, which is an introduction to the Nun Sakinah and Tanween rules. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that bi'awnihi wa qudratihi, that the Quran Learning Management System, برنامج الجامع لحفظة كتاب الله, would help you, inshallah, to improve your tajweed and improve your tilawah and help you in improving your recitation and help you, if you want, in memorizing the Quran, and to help you understand the Quran in the proper way. As we reach the end, we ask Al-Mawla Azza wa Jal أن يتقبل منا هذا العمل. We ask Allah Almighty to accept this work from us, and we ask you to make dua for those who participated in making this work come to life and reach you. Hoping you all the best. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.